Hello, BookTube. This is Aaron from Aaron Read a Book or Aaron Read a Book. Doing a Friday reads. I've got a bit of a haul first because I've gone a bit mad and just gone on a book buying spree recently. But I'm justifying it to myself because it is my birthday this weekend, well, tomorrow. But and also my science fiction video that I made a week or so ago got loads of comments, so it made me want to read loads of things. So the first two books I've got were both from comments, but this one I've seen around a lot on BookTube in general, and that's A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle. I don't know how to say it, but this is a kind of a classic that I've overlooked somehow. I think it might be not as popular in England, but I think this is a very popular children's book in America. And it's time travel and it sounds good. I've seen a couple of people on BookTube review it recently, so that helped me get interested as well. So looking forward to that one. That should be a quick and easy read. This one looks a lot more complex, and this was from a comment on my video, and this is Michael Faber's The Book of Strange New Things. This is the author who did Under the Skin, which was made into a film as well, and his books look really strange and weird, and I've never read any of them, so they all sound really interesting. I think this one's about someone going to another planet, a priest going to another planet and trying to teach them the Bible. So that's the Book of Strange New Things, but it's a very interesting cover. Next, we've got a couple of things for June on the Range, and I've got a classic old Louis L'Amour. I read one of his books last June, and it was sort of surprisingly sort of quite feminist in style, which you don't really expect from a old pulp western, and it was just a really good story as well and really fun. So I thought I'd give his series a go. So I got the first one, Sackett's Land, and the second one, The Far Blue Mountains. I'm not bothered by getting the different editions, but I like them both. They're both quite cool covers. So that's two books for June on the Range. This one I can't remember what I heard about. I think I heard about it on Gareth's channel for Book Songs and Oven Magic, but it just sounded like the kind of book I like reading, which is Nod, which is about by Adrian Barnes, which I believe is about everyone in the world can't sleep or something, and the protagonist Ken. So there's only a few people who can sleep, I think. That sounds really interesting. It's a bit like Blindness by Jose Saramago. Is it Jose Saramago? But yeah, sounds interesting. Cool cover as well. Eyeball. And lastly, this is a book I've been looking for ages, and I've had like an alert on eBay forever, because it's always like on eBay for not much cheaper than it would be to buy brand new, and there's never cheap editions when normally you can get old science fiction books for £1 or £2. But I've just bit the bullet and purchased it, and that is Always Coming Home by Ursula K. Le Guin, and this is her last sort of major book that I haven't read. I've read most of her big novels apart from this one. I love this cover as well. I think this is sort of a bit of a love song to where she lived, but it is a fantasy, I think, or science fiction, but it's kind of sounds like the Silmarillion in a way, because it's like a portrait of a place, but it's told, it's not all in novel form, it's in like articles and songs, and look at all this different stuff in here. It looks really interesting. This book really divides her fans as well, because some people it's their favourite Le Guin book, and some people it's their least favourite. It seems to really divide people, and I think just because of the nature of it, that's understandable. Yeah, they're all the books I've got in. I have got a box set coming as well that hasn't arrived in time for my Friday reads this week, but I'll show it next week. On to the books I've read, and I think I've read one of the books of the year for me. I can't imagine it not being in my top 5 at the end of the year, and that is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. And I'm confused as to where this book has come from, because it was written in the mid-90s, and the author is dead 10 years or so, and it was translated in the mid-90s as well, and it has been revised a couple of times since then, and it's seemingly the last time it was revised in 2019, I think. It just seems to have taken off since then. I've seen loads of booktubers review it. It's got like 10,000 reviews on Goodreads. All of her other books have got like 100 or 200 or something. Like, she just seemed to have fallen into obscurity. She's a Belgian author, but now it's everywhere. I don't understand what's happened with this book. I'm interested to know what sparked it. It has an interesting cover, so maybe it's just good marketing by Vintage. I don't know. If anyone knows where this book has it been, did the translation get nominated for something? I don't know. But anyway, I won't talk even too much about the story as well, because a lot of people say the same thing. It's one of those kind of stories that's better to read than hear too much about. But the basic premise is, you follow a child, or someone they call the child, who is in a bunker with 39 other women, and they all remember, or they all have memories of life before being in this bunker, but the girl doesn't. She was too small, and they don't know why there was a child in there with them, and they're hazy on, none of them know how they got there, and they're very hazy memories around when they first got there and stuff, so they believe they were drugged, and this is years and years. So the child is now an adult. There are guards. There are sets of 3 guards who are men, but they've never said a word to them. The only way they communicate is through cracking a whip. So that's already a fascinating premise. It's kind of reminiscent of the Tombs of Atuan by Le Guin, where the priestess is under the ground doing the ritual on her own for years and years, or somewhat similar to Wool by Hugh Howey, although this is much smaller in scope and much better written. But this is just a fascinating book about humanity and how the women treat each other, and how they react to the situation. So they've almost resorted to routine and saying the same things over and over again. But the child, you never learn the child's name. Well, she's never given a name. The child kind of changes things for them, and she initially does this through being aware of time, because they are not sure. They're not sure how often the guards switch over. They're not even sure if they're sleeping at night or if they're sleeping in sort of 24-hour days and things. But the child learns to count her heartbeats, and therefore starts to measure time against her heartbeats, and that kind of sparks a kind of intellectual revolution in their group, because this is new information to them. They now can track like how often the guards change, how often they're fed, how often they sleep. And this seems minor, but in their world it's massive, and lots more happens in the novel. It's not a very long novel either, but it's brilliantly done, and it really delves, like all great science fiction, it really delves into what it is to be human and how you would react in these strange situations, and sort of the love and friendship of these women. It's brilliant, and I don't know why it was an obscure novel and not. It definitely should be in the science fiction masterworks collection. I can't recommend it highly enough. It was 99p on Kindle as well, so it's a bargain. Yeah, so if you get the chance to read that, I highly recommend it. The other things I've read, I also finished Constantinople, The Last Siege by Roger Crowley. I was reading this for historathon. We're in the quarter now that's 500 AD to 1500 AD, and I snuck this one in just before the changeover. This was brilliant as well. Really fun history. I mean, I knew it would be, because I've read a Roger Crowley book before, and he's like an adventure novelist. Well, he's closer to an adventure novelist than a historian, although I understand his research is quite deep as well. But this is not a book you want for deep analysis of a event. It is just a narrative to learn about what happened, and I didn't really know anything about this at all, but it's kind of like a massive deal, because it's the end of the Byzantines and the Christians having control of Constantinople, and the Ottomans and the Muslim Ottomans coming in and taking Constantinople and turning it into Istanbul. It's their foothold in Europe and the start of like a major empire, which lasted until the end of World War One. But yeah, this is really interesting book. It just looks at all the details of the siege, what happened. It's kind of heroic defense in the face of terrible, outnumbered odds, but ultimately it fails, as we know from the name of the city. But yeah, it's really interesting characters in there, and I was really struck by how multicultural a place it is at the time, and because it's like a Christian defense of the city. The city's made up of like Italian city-state people and just random people who turn up with like 400 guys and be like, I'm gonna help. But yeah, it's very mixed, and also the Ottoman army is really mixed as well. A lot of it through enforcement, because they will capture people and force them to be in their army. But even without, it's still quite multicultural. And the leader of the Ottomans is the 21-year-old Mehmet the Second, Mehmet the Conqueror, and he is just a fascinating character. I'm really interested to see to learn about how he is thought about in Turkey now, because Crowley really kind of portrays him as a bit of a psychopath, but just incredibly determined. He thought he was Alexander the Great. When he was a child, he studied Alexander the Great, and instead of going sort of west to east, he's going east to west. So it's strange that he would choose Alexander, but he's just determined on taking as much land as possible, and that does make you appear to be a bit of a psychopath. Also, loves an impaling, and he actually fought Vlad the Impaler. But yeah, really, really good fun narrative history if you want to learn more about medieval history or the Middle Ages. And what was the last thing I finished? It was David Sedaris, Me Talk Pretty One Day. I listened to this on audiobook, and I've read it before, and last time I had the same feelings about it really, and my opinion hasn't really changed on it, but it was nice listening to him do it in that it's a mixed collection. Some of the stories are really brilliant and funny, and some of them are less so. but they're all enjoyable in their own way. But I really like the ones where he talks about his family, and quite a lot of it is where he's first moved to Paris and he's trying to learn the language and stuff. They're quite funny as well. But his family ones really pop out to me. They're just kind of funny anecdotal stories. He's got a rather good way with a rather good turn of phrase. So, and some in the audiobook, some of them were taken. Some of the stories were taken from live shows where he'd read them out live. And my friends often go to his live shows and they really love them. But I've never been, but I should go. I think he's possibly got higher rated books than this one, but it's always going to be slightly hit and miss with book short stories. But yeah, was enjoyable. What am I reading now? My audiobook is now Tehanu by Ursula K. Le Guin, which is the fourth book in the Earthsea book cycle. I love Tehanu. It's my favourite Le Guin book, I think. Although I've only read it once, and I've read all the other Earthsea books twice, or the first three I've read twice, and then a lot of collections you get only have the first three, and then because she wrote those quite close together, and then 20 years later she writes Tehanu, which and the characters in the books have aged 20 years as well, which is quite unusual. But I just love it. It's a very quiet, beautiful novel about these old aging characters and people dying, and this child. If you've read The Tombs of Atuan, the main character from that, Tanar, is kind of the main character in this as well, and she is given a child who has been left for dead in a fire, burnt, and it's about kind of the healing of that child as well, and the other characters coming to terms with being older and losing their powers and things like that. But it's a beautiful novel. It's hard to describe, and the audiobook so far is really, really well read. So I expect I am going to like that. Reading wise, I also quickly read the Edgar Allan Poe story, The Fall of the House of the Usher, because now I'm reading What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, and I saw this on Book Chat with Pat's channel. She's kind of trying to get into horror, or she's quite new to horror as well as I am, and she really enjoyed it. Or she's been really enjoying T. Kingfisher in general, I think. So I'm giving this one a go. I have to say I found the original Fall of the House of the Usher quite hard going. His language is very hard to understand for the modern ear, I think. Although his poetry is not so bad. I've heard some of his poems, but yeah, that was hard to understand. I had to look up some the story again. It's only like 20 pages. I had to read like the Wikipedia entry to work out some of the stuff that happened. I was very tired though, so maybe I just wasn't concentrating. But there were words that I hadn't heard, like tarn for lake. I didn't know that, so it was a bit confusing when there's a key element in the story that is about a tarn. But yeah, T. Kingfisher so far though, I'm about halfway through it, and I'm enjoying it a lot more than the original, because of the modern language, and it's quite fun written, and the Two Kingfishers added some interesting elements to it. This sort of sworn soldier element where there's the countries are fictional, and you follow this woman who is a soldier, and they have strange pronoun things. They have like 12 different pronouns, like, so warriors have their own pronouns and priests or something. But yeah, it's very interesting. But yeah, enjoying that so far, and I will let you know how I get on with that. That's my Friday Reads booktube. Let me know if you've read any of the books, especially if you've read Always Coming Home. I don't know if anyone has. I don't think I've ever seen anyone on booktube talk about it, in a review form anyway. And I'm sure a lot of you have read A Wrinkle in Time. Maybe some of you have read Michael Faber, maybe some of you have read Louis L'Amour. Let me know. Have a good one, booktube.